Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hello, everybody.
And we're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples for how small, emerging, and challenger CPG, consumer packaged goods, brands can build their business. Everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, how to go about securing distribution at a national retailer, driving your business with the end consumer, and how to go about finding an investor if that's important to you. The bottom line is we would love to help you be successful by highlighting the many important factors that go into establishing and growing your brand.
Bruce and I have been working in CPG commercial operations for over 30 years, working on brands of all sizes. By commercial operations, we mean sales, marketing, trade marketing, new product development, broker and distributor management, new product development, brand M&A, and financing. As a part of our show, we bring our guests that are brand founders and leaders, agencies, Amazon specialists, sales agents, contract manufacturers, retailers, and investors to discuss their experiences and share their insights with the audience.
To keep up with the show, please subscribe to the Road to Retail podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Leave us a review and consider sharing the show with a friend or colleague that may benefit from the content. You can also check out our website to learn more at www.road2retail.com and follow The Road to Retail on LinkedIn. We would love to have you along for the ride. Looking to scale or launch your supplement or skincare brand? Eagle Labs Incorporated, based in Florida, offers full-service NSF-certified contract manufacturing of capsules, tablets, powders, liquids, gummies, and lotions. All of their manufacturing takes place in the USA. From R&D and formulation to packaging and fulfillment, Eagle Labs provides scalable, high-quality production that meets FDA and NSF standards. To learn more, contact Michael Law, Chief Commercial Officer at Eagle Labs at michael.law@eaglelabsinc.com, EAGLELABSINC, Michael Law, eaglelabs.com, or text him at 203-242-6417.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Road to Retail. Bruce, we have a great episode today, but before we start, it's great to see you.
Hello, Tracy. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So before we dive into our episode, tell us about our sponsor today.
Our sponsor today is Pathfinders Advertising. When considering an agency partner, we'd suggest you consider Pathfinders Advertising. For over 45 years, they've been helping CPG brands with business building multi-channel campaigns for emerging brands and beyond. They're a diverse group of integrated marketing subject matter experts committed to helping you get the most of your marketing efforts. From package design to digital marketing to driving your social media efforts, they're always trying to do things the smart way the first time. And most importantly, Pathfinders will have your back if and when the unexpected arises. They're committed, down to earth, and principled. They work hard, and when you partner with them, Pathfinders will show you how they stay ready to rise to every occasion. There's nothing they can say that will convince you to work with them. All they can do is show you when you give Pathfinders the chance. Learn more or to reach out, go to www.pathfind.com or hit up their head of business development, Vicki Holland, on LinkedIn. That's it. Thank you, Pathfinders. Tracy, who do we have today as our guest?
Absolutely. So we've got a good friend and colleague, Greg Esslinger. So Greg, welcome to the show today. I think this is going to be great, especially our small emerging brand audience that's just, getting going, and they're toying with, am I ready for a big distributor like a UNFI and KeHE? But Greg, tell us a little bit about your background and experience and share that with our audience today.
Sure. Thanks for having me. First, appreciate you having me on. my background's pretty much I fell into the CPG world when I left college and got into UNFI just on a whim. So spent about a decade there, doing everything from being a buyer to some inside sales and some supplier management. I spent about 5 years in the supplier management side, so that includes everything from you know deciding what products we accept into UNFI to distribution and helping brands to manage that relationship and get the most out of their relationship with UNFI. So I left UNFI about, I don't know, 7 years ago now. Went out on my own, started Natural Food Ally, where basically a consulting agency where I help brands to understand all the pitfalls that they can run into. Been doing that for a while. Have worked with, I don't know, dozens of brands through the last 7 or so years. And in the last couple of years, I started working with a company closely with a deduction software company called Floret, and been working with them for a couple of years to head up sales.
Awesome. That's great. So before we start, Greg, tell some of our audience, what does UNFI stand for? Because some people may not know. Everybody just says UNFI. So
well, it's not UNFI, which I've heard.
Yeah.
It's always funny when you're vetting products and they come in and they start using the word UNFI as like you might know. No, UNFI is United Natural Foods Incorporated.
Okay, gotcha. Awesome. And then one last question, just an acronym. So you were, I think your official title when I called on you. So Greg and I know each other from the buyer salesperson relationship. What is an SRM?
SRM is Supplier Relationship Manager. They've gone back and forth a couple of times calling it just an SM, Supplier Manager. So yeah, it's essentially just the person that owns the relationship with the brands at UNFI, and just helps them to kind of like, they're in charge of getting revenue out of them, as much revenue as possible, and they're also in charge of making sure that the brands are successful within the constructs of the distribution model.
Good. Just wanted to get those acronyms out of the way. So let's jump in. So tell us a little bit about, when do you think a brand, what does a brand need to really know that says, yeah, I'm ready to do business with a UNFI and KeHE?
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, a lot of times brands don't have a choice as to whether or not they're ready or not, right? They get a retailer commitment that they really want to get into, a Whole Foods, a Sprouts, or whoever it may be, a Wegmans, and their primary distribution might be through UNFI, and so they don't really get the. A lot of times, brands just aren't ready, right? They're not ready, and they get pushed up into that distribution, unless they want to turn down those retailers. That's the only way to start selling to them. So they get pushed into the distribution. So as far as being ready, I mean, there's just so much you could touch on here. Having a broker that helps explain things, having an advisor to help bring you into the loop as to all the needs and everything attached with working with a distributor like UNFI. I think probably the most important thing is funding, though. The cost to do business with a United Natural Foods is kind of astronomical, and it's really tough on the cash flow. Working even as an emerging brand, even if you've got a big commitment, there's just so many upcharges and fees, and they can hold on to your checks for a long time. So I mean, it's really a struggle to say anybody's necessarily ready to work with UNFI unless you've already unless you're one of those brands that's been around for a long time and has a cash flow through their e-commerce business or something like that. It's a hard they're a hard distributor to just jump into right off the bat without any background or experience in that distributor model, especially for emerging brands.
Hey, Greg, a quick follow up here, because, when we get these small emerging brands or first time entrepreneurs doing this CPG thing, they'll say things like, well, I don't need a distributor. I can do this. So can you just talk a little bit about the unique and in some cases solo relationship between, say, UNFI or KeHE and certain retailers? I mean, maybe if you're P&G or Coke, you can go direct, but most other people, you kind of have a forced partner. Can you just talk about that for 1 second to kind of demystify anyone out there who thinks they're just going to do it themselves?
Yeah, I mean, these retailers, they have these set, contracts with the distributor that kind of pushes those sales through the distributor. So most of the time, you don't have a choice. It's easier for retailers to work with distributors because as far as ordering is concerned, it's all in one place. You don't have to order from a whole bunch of different vendors. So it's just, the reality is, unless you're doing a ton of business and it justifies that direct relationship, for the retailer to go through the headache of ordering separately from you and getting a much better, hopefully getting a better price, it doesn't make sense typically for a retailer to do that. So, once you get to a certain size within a distribution partner like UNFI, like maybe then you approach that conversation with the retailer to try to circumvent the distributor. But the reality is kind of the model is, sure, you can go direct to a few stores here and there. Maybe you've got some local stores you're selling to and you're delivering to, and you've got some relationships there that you've built and they'll order separately. But once you get to a point where you're working with a chain or a bigger subset of stores, it's going to be just a million times easier for you to manage just one PO coming your way and fulfilling that PO than getting in your pickup truck and driving around to 15 stores in the region. Yeah, it's a lot.
So one other quick thing, Greg, before we press on, can you just tell the group, I mean, UNFI has a specific relationship with one of the big distributors and Sprouts with the other. Can you just, can you say that so it's coming from someone beside Tracy and me?
UNFI's biggest relationship is with Whole Foods. That's they're the primary distributor for them. I mean, KeHE, it depends who you're talking about. They are very close with Sprouts, and they're the primary distributor for them for I think Albertsons as well. And then
Publix.
Publix, Kroger is kind of spread between UNFI and KeHE and does some direct too. So it's and then even Sprouts is UNFI's their secondary, right? So
right.
There's some back and forth with these distributors and who they manage, but yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. It's just good because we hear all the time, I don't need to pay a distributor. I'm just going to go do it myself. And that's dreamland. Yeah. So let's go back to your days when you were in SRM and a new brand was trying to get hold of you. What does a place like UNFI look for in an emerging brand before even considering taking them into distribution? Did you have a mental checklist, or after you met with the people, you'd be like, okay, these guys are tight, or these guys are basket cases and life's too short to help them with?
Oh yeah. The first thing I always checked was like, how much of a headache is this going to be? Right. So, here's the reality. Most products, when they came into UNFI, when I was, vetting them per se, most of them were pushed through retailers. So if Whole Foods wanted it, they got it. Didn't matter what kind of experience the brand had, what kind of a headache it was going to be, what kind of following they had. The retailer wanted it. It was getting pushed through. There's nothing I could do about it. As much power as they tried to instill into the supplier managers, it just wasn't, we were going to jump as high as Whole Foods wanted. So, so with specific retailers, key retailers, the ones that are more sensitive to UNFI, those sales were getting pushed through. Now for the brands that came and maybe they were, being pushed through a smaller retailer, or maybe they just wanted to get into a region and try to, try to get distribution before they got into retailers. There were a few things I'd look at. I'd look at social media following. I'd look at what stores they were already in, what kind of business they're already doing. I'd check to see who their broker was. Was it a broker that I've worked with in the past that understood, what they're getting themselves into? The last thing I wanted to do was bring a brand in that was completely green and didn't have a good somebody that I would have to, walk through everything under the sun with, and pretty much, it was kind of setting themselves up for failure if they're not working with somebody that understood the costs associated with, pricing and the deductions and all that sort of stuff. So I wanted to make sure there was somebody with some experience working with them, or at least they had a solid head on their shoulders and looked like someone that, I wouldn't mind sending emails back and forth to, because the reality is that, it's a people business, and, in a relationship business. And the last thing I wanted as a person in that position managing hundreds of brands is someone that's going to try to take up, 15% of my time when, I've got bigger fish to fry. And that was just kind of the reality of the situation. As a person in that position, you're dealing with much bigger brands, and you're tasked with much bigger tasks. So you didn't have time for a lot of these small emerging brands that were trying to come in.
So folks, Greg just said it a lot nicer than Tracy and I do. So one, you got to work with people who know what they're doing, and two, don't be needy.
Yeah, it's true.
If you're a small emerging brand, even if you have an absolutely kick-ass product, if you're calling and emailing Greg or people in his position when he was at UNFI, eventually you are going to get a black cloud hanging over your head that you are just too needy and helpless. Tracy?
So one thing I wanted to clarify here for our audience, your chances, and don't want to put words in your mouth, of getting into a UNFI or a KeHE, is it required that you have an anchor account or at least, a certain number of stores?
I mean, supposedly the supplier manager has some leeway there, but the reality is each one of the warehouses that's a UNFI or KeHE, whoever they have certain constraints around how much capacity, how many new products they can slot. So there's less and less leeway given for those supplier managers to actually bring in products that they think like are a winner product and just slotting. So I would say, if you want any chance, to get in, the easiest way, the best way is to have an anchor account, have an anchor chain that makes sense. If you don't have an anchor chain and you're just looking to get into one warehouse and you're like, hey, I'm based out of the New England area. I've got, you want to go into that conversation saying, I have commitments from 30 independent stores. This is the name. These are the names of them. I've got commitments from all of them. Here they are. And maybe that might get you a chance to say, okay, look, we'll give you 3 slots, your 3 best movers in the Chesterfield warehouse. And we'll give you a one-time shot. And if those independents actually pull, then you're golden and you can grow your business kind of regionally that way. But I would say 99.99% of the time, if you don't have pre-commitments or an anchor account, then most likely you're not going to get in. If you're just asking for like one warehouse, a couple slots, and you can prove that you've got all your ducks in a row, there's a teeny chance you might be able to get a slot.
And what you don't want, small emerging brand audience, is you don't want to get into a warehouse that you don't have retailers to pull it.
Yeah, it's no point. You're just going to get discontinued. 6 months for them to take and 6 months is nothing in this world. Like it takes, even if you get commitments from a retailer, it's going to take them months to actually start pulling your products. So you have to have all the commitments before you even get activated and get set up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Great point. So just to clarify, are there any other questions that you ask? You talked about, an anchor account. You talked about social media.
I mean, I asked you about funding. I mean,
Yep.
What's your backing look like? How you guys set up? Because that's one of the, you don't want a brand to come in and then their cash flow issues because they don't get paid for X amount of days. When you start out with these distributors, you're not getting, I mean, I think the official timeline is like 90 or 60 days for your first check. But the reality is that if you're getting in, you've got, slotting with a big retailer, then you're going to get charged back a boatload of money on that first invoice that you submit. And you're going to be in a negative balance. And then you're going to have to wait until you get reorders a couple of times before you actually get a check. So, and those checks that do come are typically riddled with chargebacks for various things, various fees. So you're getting, the expectation of the check you're expecting to get is going to be much lower. So we got to make sure you have enough funding to survive. And until you have enough volume with a UNFI or KeHE or, it's very hard to be profitable starting out.
Hey, Greg, would you press a brand on their supplier and whether they had a backup supplier? Were you like, look?
Yeah, it depends what the product is, right? Like if you were doing coconut oil and you were, there's all sorts of issues in the Philippines with,
lack of coconuts.
Yeah, whatever it is. So there's like typhoons or whatever is going on over there. That would happen a lot. So I would know, like with my coconut suppliers, that I would be like, okay, what's your supply chain look like? Do you have more than one source? There's, if there's someone who's like, yeah, actually we have a backup source in the Dominican, then that's great. Like, that would give me more confidence bringing somebody on. So depending on, the product or category or whatever, I would, push into that end of it. I always like to make sure that brands had a backup co-packer lined up, because UNFI is judged by their retailers on their service level, and if our service level from our vendors isn't up to snuff, then it's gonna reflect poorly and be bad for the sales team when they're having those contract negotiations with the retailers. So yeah,
it's interesting. Tracy and I, a couple of years ago, we debated, did we become coconut importers or start a podcast? So we went with the podcast because I don't know, coconuts, man.
It's a lot of stuff coconuts, man.
Well, kids used to collect them on vacation and bring them back to our rented condo, and I'm like, what are we going to do with all these coconuts down in Florida? Now we can send them to Greg. So what does a brand have to get right in order to be successful with UNFI? You've hit a lot of this. You've talked about being organized. You've talked about, if it's someone new, it's not their first rodeo, you might feel a little better. Is there just a couple of points you'd really like to drive home with our small emerging brands? It's like, listen, if you pick up the phone to call these guys, these are the 2-3 things you just have to nail.
Yeah. I mean, I think most importantly, I mean, also, I mean, I remiss that I didn't mention packaging. Like, I mean, packaging is super important. If your packaging looks like crap, or you come in with samples and you've got just a old school label smacked onto a nice silver pouch or something, it's just gonna look like, I mean,
made it in your bathtub.
No thanks.
Like a high school project.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's got to be something that you couldn't, print with your at-home printer, so it's important. I can pretty much tell a brand by their packaging, if this is going to be successful or not. Pretty easily. Packaging is really important, more so than probably the taste of the product. So So, I mean, I think getting packaging right is important. Knowing, going in, with a broker is, for the most part, I would say like that's a big thing. That was a big thing for me. If you had the right broker behind you, that meant you had the right backing, or it meant you had the right expertise. So I knew, like, if you had a specific broker, I knew that it was going to be a successful brand. So that helps a lot. And knowing that you just had the funding, so repeat myself, but that was important too.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we had Scott Emerson on the show not too long ago, and he said the same thing. Packaging was vital. He said one of the tells they looked for was that if something was off to a poor start, packaging was one of the first things they took a super hard look at.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Tracy?
Sure.
Yeah, just on that point, did you ever see brands? I'm just curious that like didn't have UPCs on their packaging, or did you know what a GTIN number was, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like business acumen. Like if they don't know what a GTIN number was, or if they didn't know, you know, how to calculate margins or their pricing, didn't know what their pricing was going into the meeting. Like there's just stuff like that,
Basic knowledge.
that if you're lacking that, that just tells me that I'm going to have a lot of work to do with you one-on-one. So, and that's not something that, time is not a luxury that these people have.
It's not in abundance.
That gets back to that statement that Bruce made about being needy. You're going to need a lot of hand holding, and I know you had hundreds of brands, and you don't have time for that.
Nope, definitely not.
Talk to us. Talk to us a little bit more about some watch outs. So you talked about the fees, talked about deductions, but what other watch outs would you tell a brand to be aware of before they start, working with a big distributor like UNFI and KeHE?
Yeah, I mean, I think pricing. I mean that alone, like, make sure that your pricing can make sense if you're going to work with a distributor, and if you don't understand the requirements from a distributor like UNFI, I mean, they're going to want you to promote. They're going to want you to do promotion, heavily promote with them. They're going to want you to participate in their marketing and advertising programs, and they're going to have all sorts of fees involved with working with them. And also understanding the retailer costs as well. I mean, not only do you have the distributor having all those requirements, the retailers then have their requirements as to how much you need to promote with them. And so all this promotion adds up, right? This money adds up, and you've got to build that into your margin. And you've got to understand how if you're going to have UNFI pickup, then there's going to be freight added onto that cost. And so you've got the freight added onto your cost. If you're going to do specific types of promotions, you're going to get upcharged quite a bit. So you got to build all these costs into your pricing structure. And then once you have the retailer markup, what is that going to land at? And if you don't have that figured out, it might not make sense to work with a distributor, to work with the distributor at all until you can get your pricing down. And some people say, well, you can, you plan to get more volume, which is then going to drive down your costs. It's like, okay, and when's that going to happen? Right. So
exactly.
We've heard that before. Volume cures all woes.
So folks, one of the things that Greg said, which Tracy and I have talked about a lot, is you have to know your all-in pricing. When you do your little spreadsheet with your cost of goods, and then you calculate, you put in a buffer for your A&P, and then you figure out a margin you want to make, and you look at your competitive set and you say, oh, $7.99 at the shelf is great. Well, Greg just rattled off several other charges that are going to be in there if you're working with a distributor. And suddenly, if you calculate all of those in there, your $7.99 is now maybe $10.49. And you're the highest priced item on the set. And guess what? The only place that's negotiable there is your margin. So suddenly your business is not as profitable as you had hoped. So you really have to know all of your all-in pricing. And the other thing Greg said earlier in the discussion was first-time folks can be shocked at how long it takes to get the first check. And initially, your balance will probably be negative. So this is not ship it on Tuesday, big check rolls in on Friday. You go to 2-for-1 margarita night on Saturday. That's just not how it goes.
No. One other follow-up I had is you talked about promotions and things like that. So I want our small emerging brand audience to know, especially, and again, comment on this, Greg, but when you saw a new brand, you were also selling them, right? On your programs, because I believe you were evaluated on getting that kind of participation. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's how the supplier managers, the category managers are, how they're giving raises, how they're hitting their bonuses, that sort of stuff. They have to bring in a specific amount of revenue, right? And so any new brand, any emerging brand that's coming in, you're getting them set up for success later on the road. As a supplier manager, you're setting them up so that you can make money off of them. So the way that looks like is there's advertising agreements that you get charged on a quarterly basis, right? There's the promotions that you have to get set up. There are slotting fees, new item setup fees, there's fees for marketing, all that sort of stuff. That all is built into that supplier manager or category manager. If you're at KeHE, it's all built into what they're rated on. So you gotta remember that as you're going in, and the inclination for a lot of these brands is just like saying yes to everything, because you don't know what leverage you have. You don't want to ruffle any feathers. And they're just excited you got into a retailer, and we'll get enough sales to offset this. We'll get enough sales to offset that. And
not later.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just not the right tack to have. And especially, if you've got a big retailer like a Whole Foods, you've got a lot more leverage going into those conversations. If you've got no retailers, if you just got some commitments and you're really at the beck and call, or you're at, it's up to the supplier manager whether or not you get in or not, they really have a say in the matter, then they're going to be pushing for more and more, and they have no problem saying no to you if you don't agree to it. So that's where it makes a lot more sense to be going in with a banner account, a sensitive account to that distributor, and get your distribution that way. That all said, you're still going to have fees. When I first started at UNFI, they didn't have much of a way to monetize those brands, but now they've figured that out since then. And yeah.
And I think one other key point I want to point out to our audience today is not only does UNFI and KeHE have promotional programs, but the retailer does as well. So small emerging brand audience, just because you get into Whole Foods, you're like, oh, this is great. But realize Greg, as an SRM, is going to want you to promote your product. And then there's a whole nother set of fees, slotting at the Whole Foods level. And then they're going to want you to promote TPRs and their advertising and their Amazon Prime and all that kind of stuff. So note that there's several buckets of fees.
Yeah, there's definitely several buckets. And the slotting fees alone, are a huge initial investment for most brands. And those slotting fees, it's not just the cost that you're selling to UNFI or even to Whole Foods. Those get marked up another 30-something%. And then you get charged back those, and it can be a huge, that's one of the biggest things that surprises brands when they first start working with a distributor.
Yeah. So Greg, you've hit on this point a couple of times already, but maybe just to drive it home, in your role as an SRM, what are the couple of reasons a brand should not think of going it alone when dealing with UNFI? Having that broker and, not being needy, but again, no matter how many times people are told to work with people who know what they're doing and know their way around, there's still those that think they're going to be that one outlier that can do it themselves. So if you could just rattle off like the 2 or 3 things about why going it alone might not be the best idea unless you're highly experienced, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, everybody thinks they're the outlier that can figure it out on their own. They're smart, there's all these super smart college graduates. They're going to start their own company and make it happen. But I mean, the reality is that these decisions, every little decision you make with your distributor around pricing, around your promotional events, that around even the simplest thing is how you're filling out your paperwork can have just monumental effects downstream, not just the first year, the second year, the third year, that are really important. The one example, there's a form that you fill out about free fills, and if you give the distributor the free rein to give free fills on your behalf because they're getting you distribution, you can get set up for crazy charges down the road that aren't even going to the actual free fill. It's just a something that you're giving to, you might get your own, you might be communicating with a retailer and get into that retailer, and then all of a sudden, and you even might negotiate no free fill, and then all of a sudden you get charged back this slotting fee because you filled out that paperwork wrong, and the free fill didn't even go to the retailer. It gets pocketed by the distributor. There's like stuff like that. That's mind-blowingly frustrating as a brand that can cost you so much money. Another quick example is just that brands will what was it? I just lost it. Sorry.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. I mean, there's countless examples around decisions. Oh, I know, it was setting up your products in the wrong pack size, like not pack size, but like a 6-pack versus a 12-pack of product. Like if you don't work with a broker, like you might say, well, it's less costly on the corrugate side if I do 12 packs or 24 packs. Like, well, you do that, you're going to be setting yourself up for awful velocities at the distributor level, which the velocities are like your lifeblood of staying active in these distributors. So there's just like decisions like that. And not only that, like, trial at retail, like there's, retailers aren't going to try your product if it's too expensive, because it's just too much of a cost for them to give it a shot. If it's a 24-pack, right? If it's a 6-pack, then the cost is much lower. So I mean, just like basic stuff like that is super important decisions that can cost your company millions of dollars down the road, right?
Yep. Tracy and I've talked about, Greg, that case packs, while not sexy, are critical, as are the inner packs. And they're new folks are like, what? It's more convenient for me to do 24 with no inners. That's right. But no one does it that way. It's going to be 12 with inners of 3.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for playing.
Yeah. So Greg, one question. So out of every 10 brands, how many brands did you see could not get the paperwork filled out correctly and never made it?
I mean, it never made it. I mean, I feel like eventually everybody gets it figured out after but sometimes it just takes them like the smart brands with a broker that's done it before. It does it, almost on the first try. Like everybody always gets something wrong. Like it's just
right,
like inevitable. But it's the difference of like 1 or 2 little things versus a year and a half down the road, you're still working on the paperwork. And there are brands that definitely were like that. Or they just give up. They'd be like, this isn't worth it. Right. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, yeah. UNFI's grown so big that there's, paperwork for, everything under the sun.
Paperwork for the paperwork.
Yes, exactly. I mean, seriously, there is. So, I mean, there were definitely brands that it took, a long time. They lost their retailer commitments because the paperwork took took too long. So, when you get approved, say with a Whole Foods, they're going to say, okay, you need to submit all your paperwork by this date to UNFI. And if you miss that date,
you're done.
You're done. You're out of the set. So
yeah, it's amazing when you're talking about paperwork. Tracy and I interviewed a couple of buyers from a very large retailer located in Arkansas, and they said that it was amazing how many brands over the years they had accepted to give a shot, and it all fell apart because they couldn't get set up in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I don't know. People like to fail for free versus pay a little money to work with folks who know what they're doing. Tracy?
Yep. So talk to us a little bit, Greg, about the services that a distributor offers. So of course, they're your logistical partner. They help get the product from the distributor to the store. But what other services does UNFI and KeHE offer? And then the other thing, maybe talk about this myth that some people think is that, oh, the distributor is going to help me grow my brand.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you mentioned, freight services, like, yes, those are always offered. They'll come pick up your product and then charge you for it or pass it on to the retailer. Then you've got your, I think UNFI has their sales service where you can actually hire them to be your broker. And that's an option. I hear the pricing is very expensive, but that's up to the brand to decide. Then there's also services around marketing, right? So all the marketing options that they have, you can advertise on their websites, you can advertise on the ordering screens, you can do shows, food shows, stuff like that. I would say, I mean, those are the primary services I'm thinking of. I'm not sure if I'm missing any, but
no, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, they're all money-making opportunities for the distributor, and they know that. I think that not having, I don't think it's smart to have your broker be the same company as your distributor, personally, because I think there's you're paying them, you're paying your broker to have hard conversations with your distributor. If you put your distributor and your broker together, it's like, it's just not gonna, you're not gonna get the effectiveness that you might out of those conversations. So, but yeah, I mean, sorry, what was the end of your question? What's the myth?
Are they going to help you grow your brand?
Oh, yeah, I mean, having the access to the freight services, right? That's going to help grow your brand, sure. The broker piece, I think that, like I was just saying, I don't think that that's going to help grow your brand, because they're just not having the right. I don't know how I want to say this, but I wouldn't. I'll just stick with the answer I gave before. I think it's good to keep them separate.
That's good advice.
I'll stick with that. But as far as growing your brand, no, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, using some of these marketing services, though, I think the majority of their for sale marketing, advertising costs, all that sort of stuff, I don't think it's a good spend. I don't think spending a ton of money on any sort of paper advertising inside their books has any effectiveness whatsoever. I think that there are a few programs like the shows you might get in front of the right people. So I think that the shows can be effective if you pick the right ones for what your plan is as a brand, a regional, if you pick the right location and all that, and you're getting in front of the right brands. I think that some of the other stuff that's more like advertising based and it's hard to get any really any ROI metrics whatsoever. So it's hard to say whether they're successful or not. But I would I would be focusing on spending your money elsewhere if it were me. But I do think the shows have some value.
Good advice. Good advice. Bruce, anything to add there before we?
No, it's it again, keeping the representation separate sounds like a really good idea to me. We have heard that the shows can be helpful because nothing's more powerful if your product lends itself to sampling, removing that economic risk of the first time you taste, drink,
right,
use something at home. It's expensive, but the conversion has proven to be there. All right, Tracy, let's find out what Greg's really all about with this next question.
Absolutely. So, Greg, tell us about your favorite brand, band, or sports team and why.
Band, or sports team. Gosh, I'll go with sports team. I'm spending a ton of time watching Lionel Messi now play for Inter Miami because my kids are obsessed with soccer and they're obsessed with Messi. So by default now, I am a Inter Miami fan, and yeah, I've been to one of their games down there a couple of weeks ago, and was able to have a good time down there. We've hit I'm up in New England, so we hit the Revolution games and every once in a while, and whenever Inter Miami is in town. So that's been fun, and we've got another one coming up soon. So we're excited about that.
That's awesome. I love that.
That's great. So Greg, how can people get in touch with you if they had questions about some of your comments here, or to learn what you might be doing now? What's the best way to touch base with you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me via email. My email is greg@tryfloret.com. TRYFLORET. Yeah, that's the best way to get in touch with me. Happy to have a conversation with anybody, any of your viewers. Always happy to interact. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn as well. You can find me on there. I post a lot, so happy to touch base.
Well, Greg, this has been great because so many of the brands that follow the show or that Tracy and I interact with, somewhere along the line, a lot of them, especially the food and drink based, end up dealing with KeHE or UNFI, and it's kind of a brutal education process if you haven't been through it before. It's like, well, wait, where's all my money? I had more sales than this. So thank you so much for your time today and educating the folks. All right, Tracy, the big finish.
Well, Greg, this has been great. Very, very helpful. So thank you, audience, for joining us today. Please continue to follow us on Apple as well as Spotify and also LinkedIn. We post every Tuesday. So again, Greg, thank you very much. We also have a website, www.road2retail.com. So check that out. We post our episodes there, as well as we have some great partners on there as well. So check that out. So thank you again, Greg, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Good luck out there, folks.